It can take 18 years or more to develop a mine producing titanium like this one southeast of Kyiv. But this deal is political as much as economic.
It's win-win. It is a way to show that there's no daylight between Ukraine and U.S. as President Trump presses to end this horrible war. He wants both sides to come to the table now by showing that the U.S. has an economic interest in Ukraine. It's a signal to the Russian leadership.
A signal that won't be welcomed by President Putin, seen yesterday greeting one of his favourite Americans, the filmmaker Oliver Stone, who once made a 4-hour-long hagiography of the Russian president. Signed by the US Treasury Secretary and the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister in Washington last night, the minerals deal marks a significant shift away from Russia by the Trump administration, as the terms are considerably more favourable to Ukraine than previous drafts.
The key here is what is not there. There's no reparations. There is no commitment to pay back previous Biden's support to Ukraine. There is no demand to push money out of Ukraine first for the United States and only then get something for Ukraine. There's no commitment, the sort of the first right, the right of first refusal on all the project. There's no conflict with the EU accession. So, all of those things have been removed.
Soviet-era studies show that Ukraine has deposits of titanium used in the aerospace industry, as well as lithium, graphite and some rare earths essential for new clean technologies. But it's not known which are in viable quantities for exploitation, and many of Ukraine's mineral and metal deposits are in the part of the country occupied by Russia.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people.
The disastrous meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy in the Oval Office in February derailed the original agreement and heralded a period when the US cut off military aid and intelligence to Ukraine. But a meeting between the two leaders at the Pope's funeral and Russia's refusal to sign up to a ceasefire appear to have turned the tide. Overnight, Russia attacked the Ukrainian city of Odessa with drones. The problem with the metals and minerals deal is that no US investors will venture into Ukraine unless they have some kind of security guarantee.
You're talking about an investment for a mine and a processing plant that's between $500 million and $1 billion. So when you have the risk that currently lingers, both from a land perspective of land expropriation, but also human security, it's quite difficult to attract that long-term capital that requires also significant amount. So a peace deal is really going to be important to give investors a long-term confidence in the amount of money they would need to bring.
Daylight revealed the damage to people's homes in Odessa. If, as he's threatened, President Trump walks away from negotiating an end to the war, the metals and minerals agreement will be meaningless, because without peace, there can be no prosperity.
Lindsay Hilson reporting. Well, I'm now joined from Kyiv by Oleg Ustenko, who was an economic advisor to President Zelenskyy from 2019 to 2024. Welcome to the program, Oleg Ustenko. Is this a win-win for both the United States and Ukraine?
I would say that it's a win-win in a sense that it's about symbolism. For the current administration, many things are about symbolism. So from this point of view, they are definitely getting from this mineral deal. From our point of view in Kyiv, it's also an okay situation. In a sense that two things are already included. The first thing, which was extremely important for us, is that we are not considering all previous assistance we were receiving from the side of the United States is not going to be included into this deal. So basically, what was granted is not going to be converted into debts. So it's okay. And the second issue that also important is everything related to our EU integration path. So there is no contradiction anymore. However, of course, when we are talking about this deal, I would probably consider that who is going to invest under the current conditions. Obviously, it's not a bad thing if somebody from the United States side is going to invest, and I assume that it's going to be an extra lobby for Ukraine in Washington, in a sense that those who are investing money there, they will probably put more pressure on their authorities, on their government, in a sense of ensuring security situation in the country. However, it's not like a given one. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you about that, because the deal is so much better than the draft deal that was put out there a couple of weeks ago. So I wonder what's changed. And the security guarantees in the deal are only implicit. Is that enough for you?
Oh, definitely, it's not enough, but it's on the other side, it's better than nothing. Of course, everybody in Ukraine would love to see any kind of formal, official security guarantees. But here we have only a guarantee in the form that United States is going to invest, and from this point of view, these investments are going to be protected from the side of the U.S. government. But again, it's a question who is going to invest. Is it going to be Trump, or it's going to be United States, or as usually we are going to have a private sector? And if we are going to have a private sector who is going to invest into the Ukrainian economy, it means that how they are going to scale the risks against profitability of all these projects.
Right. And Oleg, just a few weeks ago, we all witnessed the bruise up in the Oval Office, and things looked really, really bad for Ukraine. So did President Zelensky get the better of Donald Trump in all this?
I would say yes, definitely yes.
Okay. Oleg Ustenko, thank you very much indeed for coming on the program from Kyiv. Well, the Trump administration is no fan of what it refers to as legacy media, embracing alternative and right-wing outlets instead in a major shake-up of the White House press corps. Prominent amongst the new cohort is Natalie Winters, who at just 24 is the White House correspondent for the War Room podcast for former Trump strategist Steve Bannon. I spoke to her earlier for our podcast, The Forecast, and I began by asking about her reaction to Mike Waltz leaving the White House.
I think that there has been sort of the original sin riff in Trump world between the more neocon, start the war with Iran camp, and the more MAGA grassroots, let's not get involved in any more, certainly kinetic, foreign conflicts. And I think that that fundamental divide is something that Mike Waltz is more the neocon side versus I think you have more the J.D. Vance is a little more less interventionist. So I think that perhaps that debate comes to a head, and I think my side of the aisle, the MAGA people, are probably a lot more pleased that it's the neocon faction that's going than it is the MAGA faction.
So should Pete Hegseth also be kicked out?
Well, have they done anything? I mean, look, I think there's an interesting debate to be had about the strikes in the Red Sea when it comes to Yemen and the Houthis.
But we didn't ask your administration to bomb the Houthis. I think that was their decision.
Yeah, and I think the MAGA contingent was a little more skeptical of that. I would say don't escalate it anymore, but I think there's sort of a PTSD, no pun intended, from stuff like that, because it always seems to snowball in the same way that when governments amass power, they never relinquish it. I think when you start drone striking people in the Middle East, I think we have a very bad cultural affinity for turning those into forever wars.
And on Ukraine, the deal that has now been signed, the minerals deal as they call it, is kind of quite much more fair to Ukraine than the previous deals. Again, is the MAGA crowd happy with that? Because it's giving Ukraine quite a lot of stuff, and they're quite happy to sign it.
From day one, we have been skeptical, I think, of the mineral deal, only because to me it seems like you're leaving the door open, if not starting a whole, shall I say, snowball rolling down the hill of United States involvement. This idea of, foreign peacekeeping troops or potential United States presence, kinetic or otherwise, I think it's an unfortunate.
You want none of that?
Yeah, because I think empirically, anytime you've had the United States on the ground in Ukraine, covertly or overtly, it has not ended well. It's always ended in regime change. That being said, from the lens of recouping the $200+ billion that we have underwritten to go into that, it's nice to have some return on investment, but I wish I could just wind the clock and have not done any of it.
So just on the economy, do you think the MAGA voters, the MAGA family, is okay with what might well be a recession down the line? Is that a price they're prepared to pay when they were promised that things would just be better and better as soon as he got into office?
Well, I think we'll see. I think we're in the midst of negotiating trade deals that are going to fundamentally restructure and reorient, hopefully successfully, the entire kind of trading dynamic that exists here in the United States. So yeah, maybe it's short-term gain, and that's probably not a very politically salient or powerful message to be pushing, but it's true. Pain, sure. I think it's maybe just adjustment. What we're doing is not working. And if it were working to those global elites, tell me why President Trump has now won 3 elections on campaigning.
Let's call it 2.
3 on the idea that the current system, the status quo, does not work.
So, really interesting. I mean, just on the 3 elections. I mean, he won 2 elections, and people believe that the election in 2020, he still believes that was rigged. That is not true, is it? I mean, let's be honest. 2020 election.
3 elections, maybe 4. Steve Bannon says 2028.
Okay, what do you think? Should he run again? I mean, the Constitution doesn't let him. Should he?
I think I will take Steve Bannon's line here because he's working on a, I won't use commission, that's too formal a term, but a lot of our most, I would say, brilliant legal minds, bringing them together, focusing on how we can make that happen. But I think right now they're focusing on the trade stuff.
So you think that is a possibility? Trump in 2028?
Don't take my word for it. Who was it? Margot Martin, one of his top
advisors,
was on stage and said Trump 20. I'm quoting them. She went on stage. She said Trump 2028, and the crowd erupted in applause.
What do you think, as a citizen, as a voter, as a journalist? What do you think?
If he were running in 2028, I would vote for him.
Right. So, having passed the 100-day mark, where is the Trump administration now? Is it retreating from some of its more radical positions on Ukraine, on tariffs, on government cuts, even on immigration, in the face of several court decisions? Or in the bigger picture, is it still a big break from everything that has come before? Well, I'm joined now from New York by John Feely, a career diplomat with some 30 years service, including as an ambassador in several places. He's one of the more than 200 retired US ambassadors and diplomats who've signed an open letter calling for urgent action to challenge what they call Trump's assault on democracy. John Feely, good to have you on the program. Let's first of all get your response to what's happening here, the shuffling around in the Oval Office. Mike Waltz is out, but he gets that job at the UN. Marco Rubio, acting National Security Advisor, as well as Secretary of State. Then you've got Steve Witkoff, always in orbit as the envoy to just about everywhere. It's a confusing picture, to say the least, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it kind of reminds me of when my kids were little and we'd throw birthday parties and we'd play a game called musical chairs. And kids would get up and there'd be general chaos, and then they'd sit down for a bit, the music would play, and then they'd get up and run around again. Without trying to be too trite, I think what this represents is the rank amateur nature of this administration. And it's something we saw in the first Trump administration, and I think it speaks very much to the way an autocrat conducts the affairs of state. It is about whim, it is about caprice, it is about reacting to the latest headlines. And so when you see markets tanking, when you see a disastrous Zelenskyy meeting, when you see all of the things that are happening in the upheaval of American democracy and the conduct of the American government, USAID disappearing, what you see is chaos. Donald Trump thinks he thrives in chaos. I and my colleagues fundamentally believe that it's bad for the American people and it's bad for the world.
Of course, what he would say is that he's playing 3-dimensional chess, that there's a bigger plan here, that even though it seems chaotic at times, there's a strategic vision in mind, and that is to make America greater or stronger and richer. I mean, you could argue that, for instance, with this Ukraine deal at the moment, or when it comes to crossings at the border, I think they're down massively, dramatically compared to last year, that he's achieving some of his goals.
You could make that argument, but I think you would be wrong, Max. I think that if you take a look at the Ukraine situation, without a doubt, we would not be, and the Ukrainians, more importantly, would not be where they are today without amazing losses, without amazing resolve, without their amazing commitment to their own democracy, and the Biden administration led, and I'm not a partisan politician, but the American-led support with European support to keep them in the fight against a far larger traditional military force. The fact that the president sandbagged Zelenskyy, brought him in for a dressing down, I think may have something to do, and I fundamentally believe that that was planned. It may have something to do with the kind of perpetual TV reality show ethos that he spawns and thrives in. but I'm not sure that it's good for the United States or its traditional allies.
When I heard you speak the other day with some of your fellow diplomats, former diplomats in Washington, what you were talking about was the first signs of democracy dying in darkness. That's what you're seeing right now at the moment, and that if you wait too long, then it's too late. Is that really the way you see it here? Is this becoming an authoritarian regime?
Fundamentally and absolutely. The quote that I used the other day in our event is from a Nicaraguan former presidential candidate who was thrown in jail by Daniel Ortega. And he said that autocracy is a lot like a virus. When a virus first infects the body, it presents in an infection. Normally, the body's immune system kicks in, and if it catches it, you're probably going to be okay. If the body's immune system doesn't kick in to kill that infection with the white blood cells, and you begin to show symptoms, it's probably too late. I believe that in the United States, we are seeing, forget about foreign affairs, but in our domestic affairs, the rendering of people with legal status in the United States, to include native-born Americans, by the ICE agency and disappearing them, Max. That's a word we don't use in the United States about what happens here. You're detained, you're brought before a judge, there's a process. Well, the president doesn't believe we should have that.
Right. Okay. John Feely, thank you very much indeed. I should also point out that demonstration behind me that you can hear is against the person in the White House. And of course, you can still talk to us on television. So the media here is still free. But everyone, of course, is watching very keenly for any signs that things might change. John Feely, former ambassador, thank you very much indeed for coming on the program.